Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Gran Turismo 7. So last week update 1.56 dropped, bringing us the game's official slowest vehicle, the Mercedes-Benz Unimog. But today we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to upgrade this beast to see if we can turn it into a race car beta. Let's dive in and see what happens. So the Mercedes-Benz Unimog is officially Gran Turismo 7's slowest vehicle by a fair margin as well. It has a whopping PP rating of 32.40, by far the lowest we've ever seen, a displacement of 1767cc, 4-wheel drive, a massive 29 brake horsepower, and does weigh a fair amount at 1,940 kilograms. In terms of its aspiration, it's naturally aspirated. All this can be yours for 46,000 credits. So I've devised a bunch of different tasks for the Unimog, and the first is to beat the 500F. Of course, I'm referring to the Fiat 500F, which ever since day one of GT7 was officially the slowest car in the game. Well, one of the most notorious features of the Fiat 500F was the fact that it just could not tackle hills whatsoever, and I wanted to see if the Unimog was any different. Of course, that thing is 4-wheel drive, so surely it won't struggle as much, and well, what better location to pick than Eigen-Ørsvåg, which is pretty much just made up entirely of hilly sections. So will the mighty Unimog be able to win at the first time of asking, or will we have to go back to the drawing board and begin our upgrade path? So the first thing I had to do was actually set up the grid itself. There would be 10 of each vehicle, both completely standard. This way we can give them a fair head-to-head. So it was time to get our first race underway. Of course we'd be putting ourselves at the back and we'd actually be staggering the cars from a Unimog 500, Unimog 500. So we're starting in last place here, and straight away we can see that the Fiat 500 is already beginning to make moves on the Unimogs. Now, going into turn 1, I really completely forgot this thing weighs a fair amount and kind of overdid it. After a while though, it wouldn't be long until we start making moves on the rest of the Unimogs, which had dropped back incredibly far at this point, and in fact the Fiat 500s were pretty easily making their way through. And then I ran into a problem and realised that, yeah, even hills are an issue for the Mercedes-Benz Unimog. As you can see, we ended up with probably the world's biggest and slowest traffic jam of all time, with just a group of Unimogs and a plucky Fiat 500 stuck in between. But eventually we would end up making our moves through here and be free from the rest of the Unimogs. So after our troublesome uphill section, we'd actually be in a P10 position and beating one of the Fiat 500Fs, but not for long. It would eventually reclaim that top 10 position and we'd have to battle to try and reclaim it. And I saw my opportunity going into turn 1. As you can see, the 500F is just going to run it a little bit deep and we'd take advantage of the 4-wheel drive system here on the Unimog. However, all good things must come to an end. Once again we'd have to head up the uphill section and the Fiat 500F would perform probably the slowest overtake of all time, as you can see, just crawling past me, and at that point it would then crawl on to disappear into the distance, never to be seen again. And at that point I realised that the Unimog just didn't stand a chance. As you can see, all the 500Fs beat all of the Unimogs and we rounded out with a P11 overall. As for the overall timing leaderboard, you can see that the Fiat 500F was completely dominant in this race, completely rounding out the top 10 and way ahead of any of the Unimogs, and well, we were way ahead of any of the others as well. So it was time to start the upgrade procedure, and I kind of went the wrong way about it, completely forgetting there was a level 5 weight reduction upgrade, but that was really what I was going for, reducing as much weight as possible to see if we can get it more in line with a typical road going vehicle, in the end weighing 1338 kilograms. But it did cost me 300,000 credits, let's not, talk about that for now. But in terms of the next race, we'd go ahead with our newly installed weight reduction and actually try a VR race in this one. Now, honestly, if you do have VR, this is an incredibly impressive vehicle, and it was certainly a very immersive experience. Now, of course, the grid is once again the exact same, staggered between Unimogs and Fiat 500s, 10 of each, and well, when we got to the uphill section, it was actually much better this time around. It was still very much a traffic jam, but certainly not as bad as what we saw prior. and well, it did seem like some of the Unimogs were actually beginning to fend off some of the Fiat 500Fs, so far so good. We even managed to make a move on a Fiat 500F here, as you can see, just completely driving past him like he's nothing at really high speeds. And then, well, we continued on from P10, overtaking some more of the surviving Unimogs. Hold on a minute, is that someone buying a hot dog? Anyway, yeah, back to concentration. So, as you can see, it was going pretty well, and at this point we was up to P8 and still continuing forward with our overtake. So far, progress looking fantastic. But unfortunately, again, all good things must come to an end, we ended up P3, not quite beating all of the Fiat 500Fs, they just had far too much of a gap. So we crossed the line in P3, we were almost there. Let's have a look at the timings this time around then. As you can see, we were much closer, and whilst yes, the Fiat 500Fs did pretty much round out the entire grid apart from myself, it was a much closer battle. So it was time to go back to the drawing board, and this time in terms of upgrades I just wanted to give myself a little bit of a bump in BHP. Of course, couple this with the already installed weight reduction and the 4-wheel drive system that the Unimog has, surely at this point the Fiat 500 would be entirely beatable. So it was time to head back to the track and hope for a third time's the charm. And as you can see, straight away we're already pretty much at our maximum speed, so it seems the upgrades are really going to help us in the sections where we've been struggling. Again, mainly the uphill section where we lost plenty of pace. And as you can see, well, the Fiat 500s were already starting to make a move. In fact, one of the Unimogs had dropped down to P19. After running a little bit deep, we'd end up finding our bearings, and it came to that tricky uphill section once again. But this time around, it was a different story. In fact, the Unimogs were actually beginning to outperform the Fiat 500s. So at this point, I decided to sliver my way through the grid and get myself up into podium contention. As you can see, making short work of the plethora of Fiat 500s that were scattering the grid. So into podium contention, we still had one of the Fiat 500s up ahead, and it would come into the first few corners on the final lap where we'd end up battling away for the lead. As you can see, the Fiat 500 moving itself into P1, it was time to go ahead and try and get ourselves in that lead position. And as you can see, the Fiat 500 would block us off, but that allowed us to grab the inside line and make our move to hopefully win this race. And in the end, we build up a fairly healthy lead of just over 5 seconds as we crossed the line. Finally, task 1 was complete. No longer was the Unimog GT7's slowest vehicle. So with task 1 complete, it was time for task number 2, and I wanted the mighty Unimog to tackle American muscle cars. Yes, some of America's finest ever machinery. Now, to make it as fair as possible, all the different American muscle cars I'm going to be up against are completely stock. And to level the playing field in terms of track selection, they would be running at Willow Springs on the Horsefeed Mile. Now, of course, when it comes to the current Unimog we were running, it only just narrowly beat a Fiat 500F. So it was back to the drawing board once again to go ahead and put a bunch more upgrades on, and of course a slight bit of fine tuning, but not by much. And to finish off our new build, a new fresh set of sport soft tyres would be added. So it was time to head to the track then, and the first thing I noticed here is that I'd set the gear ratio just slightly too high. In fact, I was stuck most of the time in first, second and third gear, not really making use of all 6 gears available. Now, in terms of the cars that we're up against, of course American muscle cars are a little bit sketchy, and also we don't have much room to manoeuvre here. It's an incredibly tight layout, pretty much only made for go-karts in GT7. Anything else is almost entirely useless. However, we were making decent enough progress, but in the end we would only end up with a P5 position, unfortunately unable to tackle the rest of the American muscle cars. So once again, it was time to head back, do a little bit more fine tuning and go ahead and slap a few more upgrades on. So for our next upgrades, it was time to change the aspiration from naturally aspirated to turbocharged. So I went ahead and slapped on the medium RPM turbocharger and of course the racing intercooler to match, and this should give us plenty enough power to go ahead and win this race. We're now at over 200 brake horsepower, as light as we can possibly be, and we do have the advantage of 4-wheel drive, and we're off to a fairly good start. Really, the only thing that might stop us here is just the sheer amount of congestion due to the very tight track and the fact that these cars are pretty chunky overall and take up a decent amount of the road, so we'd have to start getting our elbows out a bit. Now, the only thing I'm worried about is that if we don't get the overtakes done as soon as possible, the lead vehicles are just going to go on and disappear into the distance, and well, we knew the lead vehicle would be the mighty Dodge Charger, and that thing is certainly not a pushover as it began to pull out a fairly healthy lead. We would end up in a podium position overtaking the Pontiac before overtaking the Camaro and having to chase down said Dodge Charger, and that thing would be way up the road, but thankfully with our four-wheel drive going ahead and helping us through the bends, we were able to match it and overtake it with relative ease, shutting down that lead in absolutely no time. So it did seem in the end that the Unimog could go ahead and beat American muscle cars. Yeah, of course we had to bend the rules a little bit here, but who cares? A win's a win. And with that win, it was time for task number 3, our final task, race cars. So would our mighty Unimog, now kitted out in a Pennzoil GTR livery, be able to tackle some of Gran Turismo 7's fastest racing vehicles? Well, it definitely meant business when it came to the livery, but of course, I need to give myself once again a slight little advantage. We did have the vehicle fully upgraded, but we didn't stop just there. Of course, you bet I strapped this thing with a nitrous system, costing me another 100,000 credits. I'm pretty much bankrupt at this point, guys. So here we were, lined up on the grid, standing start, ready for our final task, and straight away I noticed that the Unimog completely bogged itself down on the start, and then for added good measure, as everything absolutely flew past us, the Citroen decided to punt us into the barrier. So then I decided, well, let's try a rolling start then. Of course we're at disadvantage, so the Unimog begins first, and unfortunately our trucky boy, well, this would be his downfall, as it continued to plummet down the grid order like a lead balloon. Oh dear, it's not looking good, but surely it cannot fail now. It's become not the official slowest car in the game. It's beat American muscle cars. It just needs to succeed here in its third and final challenge, and well, things would only get worse from here. Yes, we continue to plummet down the order inside a couple of corners. We're already in P18, but then we managed to pick up a penalty, and by the end of lap 1 we were all the way down in 20th and last position, as the Ford GT even gave us a nudge for good measure. Now, since my mum raised no quitter, I decided I was absolutely determined to get this challenge done, and I had a bit of a light bulb moment. I went ahead and went through the vehicles that were tagged as race cars. In reality, the Unimog just needs to be one single race car, and I found this at the bottom of the list. The Mercedes-Benz 300 SL, putting out only 178 brake horsepower, it was tagged as a race car, so this thing really does actually count towards the task. So yeah, I guess in a way I did kind of bend the rules, but look, every problem has a solution, and for me and the Unimog beating a race car, well, this was the solution. Surely we can beat this thing. So it was time to set our grid. Up ahead of us was 19 of the 300 SLs, and we'd have to beat the lot for this to count as the Mercedes-Benz Unimog actually outright completing its task. So here we went at Tsukuba for 3 laps. And well, straight away I did notice that the 300 SL was definitely more of a mighty opponent than I really expected. This thing was actually pretty damn quick. So we went ahead and used the nitrous as much as possible, just reserving it for the main straights and of course taking advantage of the 4-wheel drive system through the corners, and well, it was actually performing pretty well. Again, when we got to the back straight before the finish line, we'd just go ahead and turn the nitrous back on, and as you can see, we definitely had the top speed advantage. Couple that with decent grip through the corners, and I really felt like the win was on here. Surely, just surely, we could get this challenge complete. And well, going into the final 2 laps, it was still looking very positive as we managed to get ourselves back on the back straight and open up the last of our nitrous. And at this point, we would finally get the move done to bring ourselves into P1 and be in contention to complete all 3 tasks and actually have the Unimog beat a race car. So as we rounded the final corner with over a 4-second lead, the Unimog had completed all 3 tasks and beat a race car. And there we go. So yes, the Mercedes-Benz Unimog can beat a race car inside of Gran Turismo 7. Just be warned that until it gets an engine swap, you'll more than likely have to bend the rules a bit to get this challenge done. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe. It really does help the channel out and really puts it out there for more of these videos. A huge thank you to all of my channel members listed on the screen now. If you do want to join, it is incredibly appreciated and supports the channel between uploads. And a huge thank you to each and every single one of you that have watched this video. Anyway, that's it from me today. Take care guys. Peace.